The Vought F4U Corsair stands as one of the most formidable and iconic carrier-based fighters of the Second World War, a machine whose unique design, extraordinary performance, and terrifying combat reputation left an indelible mark on aviation history. When the aircraft first appeared in the skies over the Pacific, Japanese fighter pilots quickly realized that they were facing not just another American aircraft, but a new class of aerial predator. Its long, inverted gull wings, massive engine, and unmistakable whistling sound created by the airflow through the wing root intercooler ducts contributed to its nickname, the Whistling Death. This name did not originate from American pilots, but was allegedly assigned by the Japanese, who considered the aircraft one of the most fearsome opponents they had ever faced. The Corsair's development began in the late 1930s, when the U.S. Navy issued a requirement for a high-performance carrier fighter capable of exceeding anything in the service at the time. The result was a revolutionary design built around the Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp, an 18-cylinder, air-cooled radial engine capable of generating more than 2,000 horsepower. To harness this power efficiently, Vought engineers used a massive 13-foot propeller, which required lengthening the landing gear so the blades would clear the ground. The inverted gull wing was a solution to this challenge, lowering the attachment point of the landing gear and allowing for shorter, stronger gear legs while maintaining propeller clearance. This unusual wing shape also reduced aerodynamic drag, improving overall efficiency. When the prototype first flew in 1940, it became the first U.S. single-engine fighter to exceed 400 miles per hour in level flight. For the era, this was an astonishing achievement, surpassing even many European fighters engaged in the Battle of Britain. Yet the Corsair was not immediately accepted as a carrier aircraft. Its initial landing characteristics were considered too difficult for safe deck operations. Its long nose created visibility problems. Its landing gear tended to bounce during touchdowns, and the machine's torque made low-speed control tricky. Because of these issues, the Navy initially restricted the aircraft to land-based Marine Corps units. However, what seemed like a setback became an opportunity. On the remote islands of the Pacific, Marine aviators soon discovered that the Corsair possessed capabilities unmatched by any Japanese fighter, including the famed Mitsubishi A6M0. In combat, the Corsair's raw speed, power, and rugged construction quickly turned it into an apex predator of the Pacific skies. Japanese pilots, who had dominated early air battles through superior maneuverability, now found themselves hunted by an aircraft that could not only dive faster and climb more powerfully than anything they flew, but also absorb tremendous damage and still return home. One of the primary reasons Japanese aviators feared the F4U Corsair was its overwhelming speed advantage. Early in the Pacific War, the Zero had enjoyed a decisive edge in agility and acceleration, enabling it to dictate the terms of engagement. However, this advantage evaporated once the Corsair entered the battlefield, with top speeds exceeding 417 miles per hour in later variants. The F4U could outrun every Japanese naval fighter. Speed is often the single most decisive trait in air combat, and the Corsair used it to devastating effect. American pilots could engage or disengage at will, diving on Japanese formations in high-speed slashing attacks and climbing away before enemy aircraft could react. The traditional Japanese turning tactics became obsolete, forcing their pilots to adapt to an entirely new style of combat for which they were unprepared. In addition to its speed, the Corsair possessed exceptional climb performance. Powered by the R-2800 engine, it could ascend rapidly to advantageous altitudes, enabling American pilots to initiate attacks from above, a classic energy fighting tactic. Japanese fighters like the Zero and the Ki-43 Hayabusa had excellent turning agility but poor power-to-weight ratios. They struggled to keep pace with the Corsair in vertical maneuvers, a fact exploited ruthlessly by U.S. aviators. When a Corsair pilot pulled the aircraft into a climbing spiral or zoom climb, Japanese fighters often stalled or lost control attempting to follow. This mismatch in vertical performance generated a psychological edge that American pilots quickly recognized. Japanese airmen learned that if they allowed a Corsair to gain altitude, the engagement was as good as lost. The F4U's durability also contributed heavily to the fear it inspired. Japanese aircraft, built with lightweight construction techniques to maximize maneuverability and range, were extremely fragile. Their lack of armor, limited self-sealing fuel tanks, and lightweight airframes meant they could often be destroyed with only a few well-placed rounds. The Corsair, by contrast, was heavily armored and solidly built. It could take significant punishment and keep flying, sometimes returning to base with large portions of its control surfaces, wings, or fuselage riddled with bullet holes. This robustness gave Corsair pilots the confidence to press attack runs aggressively. They could dive into anti-aircraft fire, perform strafing missions against ground targets, or dogfight in high-risk situations knowing their aircraft was far more survivable than those of their opponents. Japanese pilots reported frustration and disbelief at how difficult it was to bring down a Corsair, even with accurate bursts of machine gun fire. Some accounts describe Corsairs returning to base with cylinders shot out of their engines, large holes in their wings, or even damage to key structural components, yet still able to remain airborne. This resilience stood in stark contrast to Japanese fighters, which could ignite or disintegrate under similar conditions. Firepower was another decisive advantage. The Corsair was equipped with 6.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns, each capable of firing at extremely high rates and delivering devastating explosive kinetic energy. This armament was arranged across the wings, producing a dense, lethal cone of fire. When American pilots opened fire, the combination of high-caliber rounds and concentrated bursts frequently tore Japanese aircraft apart. The Zero, with its light construction, was particularly vulnerable to .50 caliber hits. Even a few rounds could sever control cables, destroy spars, or ignite fuel tanks. In contrast, Japanese fighters typically carried two 7.7mm machine guns and sometimes a pair of 20mm cannons, but they lacked the sustained high-volume firepower that the Corsair could deliver. The psychological effect of the .50 caliber guns cannot be overstated. Japanese pilots reported the frightening appearance of the Corsair diving toward them in high-speed attacks, spraying streams of massive tracer rounds that cut through the sky like sparks from a blowtorch. Many engagements ended before the Japanese pilots even saw the American aircraft approaching, as Corsairs would attack from superior altitude and high speeds. The nickname Whistling Death did not come solely from the sound of the aircraft. It also stemmed from the terrifying nature of its attacks. The Corsair could approach rapidly, fire devastating bursts, and disappear upward before enemy pilots even understood what had happened. Japanese aviators faced an opponent that was not merely faster or more powerful, but also completely changed the nature of aerial combat. They were accustomed to dogfights that revolved around turn radius, agility, and pilot skill. The Corsair transformed these engagements into battles of energy, altitude, and overwhelming force. Even when Japanese pilots attempted to exploit their aircraft's superior turning radius, Corsair pilots knew how to counter this. American tactics by 1943 emphasized avoiding slow-speed turning fights. Instead, they relied on boom and zoom attacks, high-speed slash maneuvers, and altitude advantage. This energy-fighting doctrine played directly into the strengths of the Corsair. Japanese pilots attempting to lure Corsair pilots into turning engagements often found that the Americans refused to play by their rules. Instead, the Corsair pilots used controlled bursts of power, rapid dives, and high-speed repositioning to dictate the tempo of the battle. Over time, Japanese pilots understood that their best chance of survival lay in avoiding Corsairs altogether rather than engaging them. Another reason the Corsair commanded such fear was its versatility. It was not only a fighter, but also an effective fighter-bomber. The aircraft could carry bombs, rockets, and fuel tanks, enabling it to perform attack missions against ground targets. During campaigns in the Solomon Islands, the Philippines, and Okinawa, Corsairs carried out some of the most dangerous close air support missions of the war. They strafed enemy positions, attacked supply lines, and supported amphibious assaults, often facing dense anti-aircraft fire. Despite these risks, the Corsair's rugged construction allowed it to survive missions that would have destroyed many other aircraft. Japanese infantrymen, too, came to fear the Corsair. Its ability to deliver rockets with pinpoint accuracy, combined with its terrifying overhead whistle, created a psychological effect on ground forces. In several accounts, Japanese soldiers reported the chilling experience of hearing the aircraft's distinctive approach, knowing a deadly bombardment was imminent. On carriers, the Corsair eventually overcame its early landing challenges and became one of the most successful naval fighters ever built. Improvements to landing gear, pilot visibility, and operational techniques allowed the aircraft to operate safely from flight decks by late 1943 and 1944. The Royal Navy played a significant role in demonstrating the Corsair's carrier viability. British pilots developed curved landing approaches that allowed aviators to keep the deck in sight, mitigating the nose visibility issue. These techniques were later adopted by the U.S. Navy. Once fully integrated into carrier air groups, the Corsair's lethal reputation only grew. It became one of the few aircraft in history to achieve an astonishing kill ratio, over 11-to-1 in some theaters. Against Japanese fighters, this dominance was even more pronounced. Pilots flying the Corsair regularly achieved high kill counts, and many of the Marine Corps' top aces flew the aircraft, including Gregory "Pappy" Boynton of VMF 214 Black Sheep Squadron. Boynton and his pilots terrorized Japanese air forces across the Pacific, becoming legends in their own right. As the war progressed, the Japanese attempted to counter the Corsair with improved fighters such as the Kawanishi N-1K, J, Shurden, and later variants of the Zero. But shortages of materials, weakened pilot training programs, and declining production capacity meant these efforts never fully matched the scale of American industrial and technological capability. Furthermore, by 1944, many Japanese pilots were inexperienced replacements, while American aviators had superior training, tactics, and aircraft. In combination with the Corsair's overwhelming technical advantages, these factors created a battlefield environment where Japanese air units suffered devastating losses. The Corsair continued to serve beyond World War II. During the Korean War, it was used extensively in ground attack roles, providing close air support to United Nations forces. Its rugged design made it perfect for the harsh conditions of the conflict. Even in this new era dominated by jet aircraft, the Corsair proved its worth by performing missions that jets could not handle effectively at low altitudes. Its cannons, machine guns, rockets, and bombs played a critical role in many operations. Some Corsairs even engaged in air-to-air combat with early Soviet-built MiG-15 jets, and while severely outmatched in speed, there are recorded instances of Corsairs scoring kills under favorable circumstances. In total, More than 12,000 F4U Corsairs were produced across numerous variants, serving not only in the U.S. Navy and Marine Corps, but also in the Royal Navy, Royal New Zealand Air Force, French Navy, and several Latin American air forces. The aircraft's longevity, combat performance, and fearsome reputation cemented its legacy as one of the greatest fighters ever built. The reasons Japanese pilots feared the Corsair can be summarized through its unmatched combination of speed, firepower, durability, and tactical superiority. It changed the way air combat was fought in the Pacific and forced opponents to confront a radically different style of aerial warfare. Its overwhelming presence and lethal efficiency made it a symbol of American air power and technological advancement during World War II. For Japanese aviators, encountering the Corsair meant facing an aircraft that outperformed them in almost every dimension: speed, climb rate, firepower, survivability, and tactical posture. It represented an enemy that was incredibly difficult to outmaneuver, nearly impossible to outrun, and deadly in every engagement. The sound of its whistle, the sight of its distinctive gull wings, and the destructive power of its .50 caliber guns became etched into the memories of those who fought against it. Even today, the F4U Corsair remains a symbol of dominance in the air. Aviation historians continue to regard it as one of the finest piston-engine fighters ever built, and its legacy lives on in museums, air shows, and popular culture. The image of the Corsair roaring down from the sky, guns blazing, wings slicing through the wind, forever represents the technological prowess and relentless determination of the Allied forces in the Pacific theater. Japanese pilots respected and feared it not merely for its deadly performance, but because it embodied a shift in the balance of the air war, one that would eventually lead to Allied victory in the Pacific. The Corsair was not simply an aircraft. It was a statement of industrial might, engineering brilliance, and combat supremacy. Its legend continues, reminding us of a time when the shape of a wing and the sound of a whistle could strike fear into the hearts of seasoned pilots across vast stretches of ocean and sky.